All right, y'all. Welcome to the Lower Chesapeake Bay Fishing Report, part of the Great Days Outdoors podcast network. I'm your host, Luke Barton, and each week we'll be talking with expert charter guides and subject matter experts about what's happening in our local waters. On this show, we advocate for sustainable fishing practices aimed at keeping this amazing fishery healthy and thriving for generations to come. As the fishing season adjusts to cooler temps, some target species are just heating up. So buckle up for another great episode. Let's jump in and find out what's been biting. Do you want to make a difference in your waterways? Toadfish is the only brand that cleans coastal waters with every purchase. Having already planted almost 300,000 square feet of oyster habitat, Toadfish is leading the charge in conservation with thoughtfully designed, eco-friendly products in a mission to protect the waters that we call home. Visit gdo.deals/toadfish, and 15% off will be applied to your cart at checkout. Toadfish, let's put them back. Listen up. AFTCO has a promotional gift for all Great Days Outdoors Podcast Network listeners. They're now offering a camo sunglasses cleaner cloth with any purchase of AFTCO products. For those cold, wet, or windy days, I especially enjoy my weatherproof fabric barricade jacket, as well as my helm insulated fishing gloves. All you got to do to get your coupon code is text LCBFR to 779-345-2918. You'll get subscribed to our email list, and we'll send you the promo code via email. All right, y'all, welcome to this week's show. We're going to have a couple new contributors this week, and this one in particular I'm excited about because he's both, family kin of one of our captains that we've talked to several times, but he's also a local and contributor here to the local fishery. He's served as a mate, I think at times as a captain. He's done it all. So welcome to the show, Bobby Castinas. How you doing, brother?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. Am I pronouncing the last name correctly?
Yeah, you got it.
Got it. So you're the smarter, better looking Castinas, and Russ is just out there doing Russ things.
I don't know about all that.
Just kidding, man. So welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about what's it like growing up with a dad that is a charter fishing captain.
I tell you, it was great. I'm 34 now, so I started riding along when I was about 9 years old, and I just loved it since day one. Running around the docks, and it actually ended up being when I was about 15 years old. The boat beside us, the mate didn't show up one morning, so I was already down there. So I jumped on that boat and started mating for them that day, and ended up mating for them for the rest of that summer. So kind of never looked back from there.
That's awesome. And I mean, thinking back to your first fishing experience, like what was there a moment, like defining moment where you're like, yes, I love fishing. This is for me.
I mean, it started out just on the docks catching croakers off the docks. I mean, you're ate up with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would say I had a similar experience. That first carp I caught off of the back of my deck when I lived on a little lake off of Witch Duck Road, and I was like, man, that's awesome. I need to do more of that. And then fast forward 10 years, and it's as much as I can get out, I get out. So you grow up. Your dad's had I don't even know how many boats. What's that been like watching these boats come and go?
Well, he definitely likes the construction part of it a lot more than I do. So, but I think this is the sixth boat that he's built now. So it was a long build, but it's a very nice boat.
And when they're in that build process, do you kind of inevitably get brought in as free sweat equity?
Absolutely, getting in that grinding fiberglass, getting all itchy.
That's got to be a unique challenge. Like folks listening have probably never been through like a boat build process, which I'm sure has several, individual parts that are equally hard, but all different. Which part, you mentioned grinding fiberglass, which part of building a boat would you say is the most painstaking?
I don't really know. I mean, in the beginning of it, you kind of see everything coming together, and you see in a lot of the big components go together. So it's like, okay, we're getting closer, and then once you start to try to work on interior stuff, the whole build kind of slows down, and you're antsy to start fishing, but there's still a lot of work to do. So,
yeah, I think in my experience, I've never built a big boat, but it's like anything that's like kind of plumbing or electrical where you end up in that like really awkward spot, like bent in a pretzel, and you're trying to, apply a bunch of tensile strength. It's always you walk out of there just like, man, I need to go straight to the chiropractor or maybe to a hot tub somewhere.
uh,
So I want to dive into some fishing. So we've talked to a lot of captains, right? And their job as captain is very different from the job of a mate. Not saying that one or the two is more important than the other because they can't exist without the other. So I want to dive into the kind of the mind of a mate on an offshore fishing boat. So talk me through like days leading up to an offshore fishing trip. Like, let's go back in time to, we talked about that blue marlin that unfortunately passed, so let's go to that trip as an example. Were you the mate on that trip?
I was.
Okay. So 3 days before the trip, 2 days before the trip, whatever, talk us through the preparation that goes into as a mate, making sure that we're ready to go out and be successful for an offshore fishing trip.
I would say it actually starts well before that. It really starts in the wintertime, like here in about a month or so, or probably January. I'll start taking all the tackle off the boat, and then I'll have the wintertime to go through all my tackle, respool all the rods. I mean, you're talking oil and guides. If any reels are not working properly, working on that stuff, and then as far as making rigs, making leaders, so that I'm kind of prepped for everything before the season even starts. So that way I'm not trying to play catch up on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Tie 100 sea witches. So it really starts then everything's kind of ready for the season. And then I can just kind of, as I use stuff, I can kind of replace it and not just be starting from square one.
Yeah, I would never have thought about that level of detail, like oiling the guides and, all of that stuff that goes into just being, ready. Like, do you have is there like an inventory list that you work against? Like, how do you make sure that like you've got everything on the boat that you need to have on the boat?
I do. I have lists all over my house. I'm very list oriented. So I have a checklist of everything I have to go through each winter and kind of just make sure I get it all done.
Now, did you develop that process yourself, or are you just like naturally, gifted in terms of like lists?
No, that's probably just a me thing.
Okay. Yeah. Is there like a master list that like here's all the lists that I have, and there's an appendix for the
Yeah,
for the different lists? I mean,
absolutely.
because I do a little bit of bay fishing, right? And it's a very, very short list of the things that you need to go, fish in the bay and be successful. So when I've been on offshore boats, I look around and I just see all the stuff. And then there's an old saying, I think it's EFAP or something like that. It sounds like I have a list, but it's not. It's a saying. It's an acronym for everything has a place and every place has a thing. And you see that represented on offshore boats. And so it's like somebody's got to be the mastermind. Like that stuff didn't just magically get there.
Absolutely. And then to make it more complicated, we do inshore stuff too. So then you got a little bit of everything on there. It's amazing when you go to take everything off how much stuff you really have on there.
The real secret or the real question, I guess, is when it comes time to getting all that stuff, you know, from the tackle shops, those
Mm,
are some big bills, I'm sure. That's where dad's credit card comes into play, right?
absolutely. I kind of have some skin in the game, so I know not to go crazy.
Because I know those bills can rack up really fast. So
Oh
so
yeah.
you're talking, winter time. We're prepping for the, summer, fall, fishing season. So then fast forward to we're into the fishing season and Captain Russ says, all right, Bobby, we got a trip. This is what we're going to target, blah, blah, blah. What kicks into gear then in terms of getting the boat ready for, whatever that target day is going to be?
So normally the time we're leaving the dock around probably 4:30 in the morning. So I'm usually getting there sometime between 3:15 and 3:30. Start thawing out bait. Go get ice. Go pull out what rods I need for what we're trying to accomplish for the day. And then a lot of times I like to just rig my baits on the way out. We got a 2.5 hour ride out there, so
Yeah.
we have plenty of time to do that. Prep ballyhoos. Always have strip baits cut for if we find something floating for dolphin or if we do any bottom fishing later in the day. You don't want to have a school of dolphins jump you and then you don't have bait cut up yet and then you're just scrambling all day.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. And I can tell you from personal experience where we've been in a situation with a blue marlin where we didn't have a bait ready because we were just doing one type of fishing. And then all of a sudden that blue marlin's there and we frantically tied on a bait, not realizing we were tying it onto a line that had a bird in line, which
Yep,
then created drag. And when that marlin tried to remouth that bait, the drag of the bird just pulled it right out of that fish's mouth. So it's like, not only do you have all that stuff, but you got to be like acutely aware of what stuff you have. So if you got to call that audible in a moment because of school of mahi or whatever you name it, you're grabbing the right stuff for the job.
absolutely.
So rigging a ballyhoo, cutting up strip bait, you kind of like run around, doing all these things. But I do like want to understand for a second, what's the proper technique for, obviously we're on, audio here talking rigging a ballyhoo. Is there a secret sauce to it or does everybody apply their own way of doing it?
So it's a little bit different if you're using J hooks if you're tuna fishing, or if you're marlin fishing using circle hooks. You still thaw your bait out, and we call it prepping it. You kind of squeeze all the poop out of it and you poke the eyes out. I usually wait to break the backbone until right before I go to put them out, because if you do that like the night before, they start to get bloated and turn yellow. It's like it starts to break down inside the bait.
Interesting. Almost like cracking a glow stick. It just like expires too quickly. That's interesting. So, and then breaking the back,
You kind of pinch the backbone, and you kind of feel a little pop, and it just helps them kind of paddle a little bit better.
okay, so give it a little bit more life in the water there. And then
Mm-hmm.
cutting up strip bait, are we just talking squid and
If I have albacore, I'll use that just because I like having something that has some skin. Because if a dolphin bites you and it gets most of it, it's not going to get the skin, so you still got a chance. If I don't have that, I'll use squid.
okay, got it. Very cool. And then, we're out there, we're out fishing. Obviously, captain's calling the shots and making the decisions on, where you go and how long you stay there before making a move. But, what's it like? Like, let's get into kind of the real talk here. As a mate, like what are some of the things that people probably would never believe goes on as a mate on a boat?
Well, now it's kind of interesting with either Starlink or the Garmin InReach texters that you're able to talk to other people that are out there. So even if someone's not putting something on the radio, if you got a good network of people, you still know about things. So
Mm.
that's kind of helped a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. What about unique stressors that, you probably have to play it cool as a cucumber when things aren't going right or whatever. But as a mate, what are some of the things that you have to like kind of keep hidden, so to speak, so that people aren't alarmed or whatnot?
Well, you got six guys that normally they probably fish. If they fish a couple times a year, they might just be the couple times a year that they fish with you. So, I mean, this is their one day.
Right.
So every day we get to fish a lot. It's their one day. So it's not an option to not make something happen. So
Right.
you kind of just got to figure it out on the fly and go with the best information you have available.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hinting at is the idea that like you guys deal with a unique stress, which is to like make it happen, and you can't control the seas. Your dad has jokingly said before, it's not like somebody goes out there and restocks the mahi on the fad overnight. It's like you got to go out each day, put all the information together, get located, maybe look at your chlorophyll shots or whatever, put the picture together and then somehow make it happen. So, at what point would you say was that like a really stressful thing to like feel that pressure for a period of time, or does it go away with time?
That's every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Sweating until that first clicker goes off, right?
Yeah, until you got a box full of fish, and then you're worried about the next day already.
Right. It's like I remember, back in my old days, I was a DJ, an entertainer, and did weddings and parties and whatnot. I remember getting so stressed every single time and nervous and anxious, and talked to somebody who'd been in that business a long time. I said, "Do you ever get over the nerves?" And he's like, "No, the nerves are good because it reminds you that you care." And I think the same would be true. Like you guys are doing this because you're passionate and you care. So therein is the anxiousness until you get that bite. You know, if you could go out and fish for anything, take a charter off the table for a second. If you could go target any species and do something fishing wise, what would it be?
Marlin fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Tuna fishing when it's good, it's fun, but really marlin fishing, it's more interactive. You're constantly looking for them. You need to kind of do more when you get the bite. So
Yeah.
it's a little more exciting.
Yeah. That seems to be the case, whether we talk to any captain, it's like, what would you want to do? I want to go marlin fishing.
Mm.
So, mates, what are some other kind of like the dirty jobs that mates have to deal with?
So other than rigging baits, you got cleaning the boat when you get back home. That's probably another hour, an hour and a half.
Especially
So
when how big's the top notch now? Is it a 50,
58.
58? So you got 58 feet of boat to clean.
Oh yeah.
Okay, what's the list for cleaning? We're gonna clean the boat. Where do we start? Where do we finish?
Well, I mean, a lot of my people joke me when we're running home, and it was like, man, you got the cockpit cleaned, you got all your rods put away, you're done for the day. I was like, oh no, I do all this to save myself another 45 minutes. So then I start on the rest of the boat.
So what does that look like? We're in the slip, we've maybe cleaned all the fish and the folks, high five, great day, they go home, and then your actual cleaning job starts. Now, what does that look like?
Just depending on how rough it is, whether you really need to soap everything or rinse everything off, chamois everything. Yeah, just kind of work from the top down.
Yep, and just clean her all down. And chamois is where you're taking all the water off after you've soaped it, right?
Don't have all the water spots.
Yep, yep, absolutely. And I'm a big fan personally. I use salt scald on my boat.
Hmm.
That chelating agent that leaves that little bit of a kind of waxy coating behind that also kind of helps to stave off the corrosion has really been helpful for me. I don't know if you guys use a similar product.
Tried it. I have to look into it.
Yeah, we'll get you set up with it. It's kind of like you remember the early days of Rain-X,
Uh huh.
and it kind of leaves that and it makes the water beat off. You kind of have the same thing, and then
Gotcha.
kind of the little hidden benefit is that there's a bunch of electrons built into it. So salt and corrosion is hungry for electrons. It normally pulls it out of your metals. Instead, it can pull it from the agent that is left behind. So it's kind of a neat product to look into.
Oh yeah.
So those listening that are going to get out on the Top Notch one day and go fishing with you and your dad, they're going to get to meet you in person and experience the way you fish. Obviously, the communication between captain and mate is huge when it comes to like backing down. What would you say are some of the most like not tense but like critical moments when you're tight on a big fish, whether it's a big tuna or a big marlin? Your job as a mate in that moment, in terms of like leading the fish, like talk me through that. Like, how do you get through that and make all the right calls somehow and get that fish in the boat?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just communication. And if people think that we're yelling at each other, it's like you need to make sure the person hears you the first time. I can't if you need to go forward, hearing you the second or third time because you didn't hear them, that is no good.
Right.
So we're not necessarily yelling. You have engines, and we're just trying to make sure each other hears each other. So it's not necessarily yelling at each other. It's just communication is a big key.
Really, really loudly so that
Yeah.
they hear it. And then I've seen, some of the videos of you working, those fish back there. So I see Sal sometimes like when the fish gets close, like you move or change the angle of the leader for different reasons. What are you doing there with that leader as you're working that fish in?
If it's a billfish, sometimes I'm doing that to try to make them jump. Sometimes
Ah,
if you agitate the line, then they'll start jumping.
really? Okay. So
Hmm.
I'm picturing this, right? The fish is on the other end of the hook. So
Hmm.
what are you giving it like small, yanks, or are you moving the angle? Like what are you doing to agitate it?
Angle.
Okay. And
Hmm.
then they feel that and for whatever reason decide to jump.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yep.
that's cool. That's very cool. And then in terms of getting those fish beside the boat safely, what's the process for that if you're able to?
Yeah, if I'm able to get them close to the boat safely, to kind of just pull them alongside, so then trying to get the person out of the chair, and so they can kind of try to get a picture with it. Try to do that if possible.
Yep, very cool. That is that kind of like one of those like is it safe, unsafe, or is it just to be determined? Because you got that big massive fish right there with that big old, bill, whatever it is. You're the one that's between the fish and the person fishing. Like, have you ever had a moment where you've been like, "Ooh, that was close."
There's been a couple of them. There's been one that tried to jump over the side of the boat and kind of had to push it back over. But
Oh my.
but I mean, each fish is different. You can kind of tell when the fish is gassed and they're done.
Right. And they just kind of hang out and give up. Do you have to revive billfish kind of like you do cobias and reds?
Generally, we don't spend that much time with them. So if they're still really lively and jumping around in the boat, you can kind of just break them off and let them go about their day. If the fish looks really gassed and they started to turn brown and don't look lively anymore, I would try to revive them.
Got it. Very cool. Well, man, it's just neat to kind of get to poke around inside the mind of a mate because obviously you guys are, that unsung hero that's doing all the things, the lists, the prep, the kind of intelligence of like, okay, let's get this thing ready and move this thing around because we're going to do this thing and then boom, all of a sudden all these fish come on board. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to get to have you on in the future soon.
Yeah,
Any upcoming trips for Top Notch? Things that you guys are going to be targeting here? It's
yeah,
almost November.
I know. If some water pushes in and the tunas and wahoos show up, there's no water out there right now. We do have a trip to go sword fishing next week. I know there was several caught today, so
Yeah,
hopefully it's getting better and sword fish and bottom fish a little bit.
very cool. And are you guys going to be daytime sword fishing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Uh, just brief overview of the differences in daytime versus nighttime sword fishing. How are you guys going to be targeting those swordfish?
So you fish for them pretty much on the bottom in about 1,200 to 1,500 feet. And it's weird. You run 65 miles out there to then stop the boat and you're drifting. And I fish one rod straight down and I fish one off a buoy. And you're fishing down there with the 5 pound lead or heavier, depending on the current, and fishing 1,200 feet down there.
That's deep.
You think you would be looking for a big bite because it's a big fish, and you're just looking for the rod tip to flinch. So it's different.
That is very interesting. I mean, it's like the ultimate Carolina rig, 1,200
Yeah.
feet down.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy. So, and in terms of like the depth, 1,200, 1,500 feet, is that because daytime eyeballs are so big, sensitive to light, so you kind of know that they're going to be in that kind of target depth?
Yeah, that's just where they're hanging out during the day. Now, I have seen a couple of them up top when we're trolling around. They normally don't bite when they're up top sunning during the day, but I've tried to free harpoon one that didn't turn out so well. But
I want to hear this story. Free harpoon a swordfish? How did
I,
that go down?
I threw a harpoon a few times. I was unable to hit him.
You see those guys do it on those, fishing shows. Was it what was the challenge of actually hitting it? Just is it that hard to throw one accurately, or is it
He
just the
finally
mo
called the fact that we were coming up to him before we actually got on him. But he was flinching every time I would throw it.
got
But
it? Okay, that makes sense, and hence why they have those crazy long bow pulpits so that you're able to kind of like sneak up on them without you, seeing them coming, so to speak.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fun, man. Well, folks that have gotten the pleasure of hearing the perspective of a mate, on a big offshore boat, it's been a treat. Folks that are wanting to get on board top notch and swordfish or maybe chase some tuna or wahoo, what's the best way folks can contact you guys and get booked for a trip aboard top notch?
Either through our website, fishtopnotch.com, or you can call the captain, Russ, at 757-681-8068.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bobby. I appreciate it so much. Pleasure having you on.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Absolutely. All right, guys, stick around for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back with you shortly. Hilton's Offshore Charts. The days of heading out and blindly looking for good fishing areas are pretty much over. Don't waste time and money on fuel searching for fish. You need the most recent, highest resolution images to not only know where to go, but where not to go. The knowledge provided by today's technology is critical when planning an offshore fishing trip. So make the choice that professional captains all over the East Coast make and choose Hilton's Real-Time Navigator. The easy-to-use interface and excellent customer service will have you on the fish every time you go. Check them out at hiltonsoffshore.com. That's hiltonsoffshore.com. All right, guys, welcome to this segment. I'm excited to introduce a new contributor to the show, Captain Caleb Underwood with Naughty Dog Charters. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, man. I'm excited to have you on. You and I have run each other on the water several times. You guys are a pretty versatile operation in terms of the different species that you'll target. And, one thing that's been popular in years past and is certainly, top of mind going into, this fall fishing season, is the striped fishery here in the Chesapeake Bay. And,
Yep.
you guys are obviously ramping up to start chasing those things in December,
Yep.
which is like literally right around the corner.
Coming.
So I want to talk striped bass and what goes into that. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about Naughty Dog Charters, the type of boat you run, and just overview of your specialization and maybe some fishing experience.
Yeah, so Naughty Dog really was kind of like a childhood dream of mine. I wasn't one of those guys that grew up, with a boat, didn't have access to one. It was always just like a long shot goal, and got out of college, started working in the marine industry, started getting my licensing, mating for a bunch of guys, one of which has already been on the show. Jack was mating for Jack and stuff, and thought I could really do something with it. And when money became important, I was like, hey, I think I can do something with this. I just need a boat. So here comes the boat, and here comes the charter business. Got a 24-foot Key West, threw a tower on it immediately because we fish in the Chesapeake Bay. Why would you not have a tower?
Yep.
And just gave it a shot. Life came at me quick, got married, had a kid. So, balancing multiple jobs, but just doing what I can, doing what I love. I always tell my charters, there's nobody that wants to be out here more than me. So, I'm not fishing hard every day like some of these guys, but I'm putting in maximum effort. There's no doubt about it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I admire about you. It's certainly something to juggle a full-time job plus run a charter business, and then you've done the trifecta of wife and new kid. So
Doing it all
congratulations.
at once.
How
Thank
old's the baby now?
you. She's almost 3 months. Almost
Good.
3 months.
Congratulations.
Got a lot
Well,
on our hands. Yeah.
having
Thank
a
you.
child in the middle of the fishing season, what were you thinking?
Not smart thoughts. Not smart thoughts. I'll put it that way.
Hey, you can't schedule miracles, man. That's awesome.
That's
Congratulations on the
right.
addition to your
Absolutely.
family. And looking at pictures of the boat, the Key West is a great fishing platform.
Yeah.
You've got some comfortable seating there in the back, some nice cushions, and folks can get out there. In fact, my neighbor,
Yeah.
she and her kids, wanted to get out there, and you guys put them on an excellent trip. I think y'all did a inshore or a bay slam. I think you got a cobia, a red
Mhm.
drum, and something else I forget.
Geez, well, I mean, I think that day was like bluefish, cobia. Did I flounder fish with them? It all mixes
Reds.
together. It
Yeah,
was, yeah,
it was
it had to have been the
bluefish,
reds.
cobias, and reds, and they
Yeah.
they had the time of their life, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this was amazing."
Yeah.
But you are going to be targeting, these striped bass. So,
Yeah.
for those that are listening, that we call them different things. In fact, we were just having a conversation the other day with some folks from the West Coast, and they were calling, rockfish, which is actually a different species over there. So over here on the East Coast,
Mhm.
striped bass, striper, rockfish. Baseline education, like where do we get those names from?
Beats me. The stripes on their bodies. That's all I can say. I definitely don't claim to be an expert, but that would be my first and only guess.
Yeah,
It's
and
got to
maybe
be
the
the
fact
stripes
that
on the body.
they sometimes are around structure or rocks or
Yeah.
whatnot. So rock bass, rockfish. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, but it's obviously a delicacy in terms of table fare, and it's unique in that it's one of the two besides I guess Menhaden that is
Mhm.
federally regulated as opposed to
Correct.
state regulated.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. Yeah. And said I think that's the whole allure to it. And actually why it's so prominent is just because there's always guys arguing about what's right and what's wrong with this species, just as you hear about Menhaden with all that stuff. So it's just one of those hot button items.
Yep, absolutely. Well, talking about fishing for them, you guys are
Mhm.
going to start running trips, so folks that are listening to the show and are going, I've heard about the mysterious striped bass, and
Yeah.
I'd love to see one up close and in personal, and maybe get the chance to keep one.
Right.
When does the season actually start technically for? Is there a season where we can catch and harvest the large ones, or is it just trophy catch and release?
So yeah, no longer. And I'm fairly young, so we got to think. The last time I was able to harvest a large striped bass, I couldn't put an exact date on it, but I want to say it was probably 6 to 8 years ago. Ever since then, anything sizable that we're catching, which most of the time these fish are citation size fish, you are not allowed to keep them, and it's been that way for quite a few years. So this is all catch and release. Just you're catching a true trophy.
Yeah, I think I've got a picture in my phone to go back with Brad Herndon and Zach Duke. Brad over there at Oyster Cove, and Zach Duke's got that cool Southport. It was quite the
Yep.
quite the story, but long story short, we went on this adventure out of Eastern Shore on Brad's boat. We threw a rod through the engine, limped back in. It was still early. We went over there like 4:30 in the morning and came back across the bridge, hopped on Zach's boat, ran back over, got the lines out, and caught a 49-inch, 41 pound, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I think that was 2017, I want to say, back when you could harvest one.
Yeah, it's been that long, and a lot of guys have kind of given up on it. I don't want to speak for everybody, but there's well, one, without being able to harvest them, a lot of guys see no purpose.
Yeah,
But secondly, before last year, the last time we had a good striper bite in our area, and I'm talking about the big striper,
yeah.
I was probably 10, 12 years old, trolling mojos and stretches, just doing what everybody thinks is the way to do it, or what they remember it as,
Hmm.
anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, leading up to, probably last winter, you're going out striper fishing for these things and you're hoping to catch one. It's a big have faith, have the belief. It's not like any other fishing around.
Yeah, they're beautiful creatures when you get one up close and personal. And I mean, last I guess December,
Mhm.
mid-December, when those bluefin were in, and
Oh,
everyone's
it's
out there
yeah, it's just crazy.
hard focused on the bluefin, and you hear, oh, we're stretched out, blah, 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 and then, oh, it's a striper. And it's like, well, Dude, I'd be excited.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I guess when you're catching a striper on an 80 wide, it's not as intriguing.
true. It's like winching a boat up a trailer. You're just cranking it in,
Yeah,
no
exactly.
fight. Um, so dive in for a little bit. Obviously they're a kind of illustrious creature to go after. I'm sure it's not just your typical, throw a lure in the water and hope you
Yeah,
catch one. Let's talk through getting located. So we
yeah.
want to go chase striped bass.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you as a captain, in your experience are thinking about in terms of, I'm going to go here and here's why to start
Right.
looking?
So they're highly migratory fish first and foremost. So the first thing you're doing is, just like many other things, it's keep it simple. You're looking on edges, drop offs. You're looking for structure, absolutely. But the big thing is define your channel edges, find drop offs, and find that water temperature. There is a point where it can get too cold for striper, believe it or not. They will start to push out if it gets too cold.
Hmm.
And on the higher end of that, you got to wait for that colder water for them to get in as well. So, historically, like I mentioned earlier, they were, all over the ocean front, and you could really go wherever you wanted. But with things going on in the bay and stuff like that, put it on Omega, put it on whatever you want. They've changed their migration patterns quite a bit, and it tends to be, near the eastern shore and even on the western shore, as well. You're finding your channel edges. And you're really starting there. You're looking for bait marks, you're looking for fish marks, and then that's when you're really starting to go for it.
So Eastern Shore, I think, most folks understand, okay, we're thinking, Cape Charles,
Yep.
Buoy 36 and up that route, I think they call that the Cherry Stone Channel. And that's got some really unique features to it in terms of like some really deep 100 to 120 foot
Oh
deep
yeah.
sections. And then
Mhm.
boom, right up until like an 18, 15-foot section. When
Right.
you say Western Shore, where is that you're talking about?
So actually, another guy that you've, talked to a few times on here, I believe, Colt North.
Hmm.
I stayed in contact with him a little bit because he was, running charters on his side of the water. So you're anything off the peninsula,
Okay.
that area, so Western Shore. What's cool about it too is those guys like Colt are predominantly targeting the striper that are within that slot that you can actually harvest and keep. So he's got trophy guys and I've got guys that want to eat fish. So we're talking about trading off back and forth. So just right up that peninsula, the same thing we're doing, but the shore's on their west side. So it's kind of cool in that, it's kind of weird how there's all the big fish are on this eastern side and then all those schooling fish are on that western side.
That is really interesting to think
Yeah.
about, and then to try to like unpack the why. Is
Yeah.
it that the bigger fish are up there because they like those tributaries for maybe like spawning or dropping
Right.
their eggs,
Yeah. The
and then
rivers.
these schoolies are over here because maybe there's a water temp differential, or maybe there's an easier bait source. Like it would be really cool to unpack it. Obviously, we can't like interview a fish
Right.
and
Right.
ask these
Right.
questions. It would be
Yeah.
great to do that.
It'd be nice if
Uh,
we could.
yeah, for sure. So, Colt's great captain. You mentioned you kind of got to study under, Captain Jack, who's also, just an incredible fisherman and contributor. So I want to think about, if I'm a recreational guy, obviously option A, go out with an expert like yourself and increase my odds of getting, hooked
Yeah.
up. But if I'm a recreational guy that's going to try to target them, we talked about getting located. So let's say we're going for trophy fish. We're on
Yeah.
the Eastern Shore. What are some of the things that out of the box, I'm not going to know that I should know when it comes to trying to get a bite? Bait, tackle, and then approach. Is it really complicated, or is it something that the everyday man can kind of like adapt to?
The everyday guy can absolutely do it. It's a lot less complicated than it looks. If I start with something as simple as your tackle, you're using pin squalls, Shimano toriums, 20s, 30s, things like that. You want to use monofilament. Just a little tip: do not use braid if you can help it. You're using planer boards. Braid doesn't stretch. You're going to trip your planer boards a lot on accident. Depending on weather conditions and stuff, the planer boards can be real tricky to grab. But with that being said, if you're fishing with mono, you shouldn't have an issue. But yeah, there's a lot to it. You're fishing almost like a V formation with planer boards. And depending on current, if you're going with the current, you can drift these baits essentially
Mm,
using the boat gear as a way to keep your boat heading a certain direction.
right.
Going against it, you want to be going that knot and a half. speed, essentially drifting, but you're going against the current. So if you didn't put the boat in gear, you wouldn't be moving.
Right.
But yeah, you're using basic stuff, medium heavy rods, 6.6, 6.7. Like I said, conventional tackle. And what you're doing there is you're going anywhere from a 1/4 ounce to a 1 ounce lead, with a barrel swivel in front of that coming right off your main line, like I'd mentioned. And then I'm doing about 6 feet of 30-pound fluorocarbon to an 8/0 circle hook. That's a big part of it, inline circle hook. We cannot use J hooks. It is illegal to use on these big fish. So, and I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty certain you have to use circles.
I think that might be part of the either new or recent changes, but yeah. And so an inline meaning like there's no offset. So it's truly just inline, which thinking through that, practically it's really like, okay, you picture that bait getting sucked down into the fish's stomach.
Right.
If there's an offset, there's a good chance that it could grab some stomach tissue on the way back,
Yes.
even though it's a circle hook. But with that inline, it's pretty much a guarantee that's going to come out and only catch hold of the corner of the mouth, hopefully.
Correct. That's the idea behind it. And I know I'm kind of weaving in and out and stuff. And as I say, it's not confusing. I'm making it very confusing. But essentially, once you get your tackle correct, like I said, it's just a sinker, barrel swivel, fluorocarbon, inline circle. And then what most guys will do is as you're setting your lines out with an eel, everybody uses eels. You're gonna take about 10 to 30 foot of that line, pull it out, and then you're gonna set your planer. What those planers are going to do is they're going to catch resistance and they're going to push themselves out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you're going to get that, like I said, a flying V formation.
Yeah.
Once you get those planers out, they kind of avoid themselves because they push outside of the boat. They grab a big part of the water without you having to, bob and weave to cover ground. But then that's kind of it. It really is just like you're drifting and you're waiting for that bite. It can be boring at times. Don't get me wrong. It's cold.
Right.
But it's so fascinating. It's much more involved than you would assume this type of fishing would give you.
Yeah.
It's really cool, but it is not confusing. And like you said, I would recommend definitely, looking up your videos or doing it with somebody who knows what they're doing. But it's one of those things, once you see how it's done, there's not much to it.
Yeah. And then what do these things fight like when you actually get hooked up? I mean, striped bass, cold water, you're thinking that the fish is going to be sluggish, but are they?
There's times when they are and there's times when they're not, man. It's one of those things. And I know, a few guys like to use bigger tackle. I know guys that use TLD 25s for these fish.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense, it's cold water. You have to assume that these fish don't have much in them in terms of energy.
Right.
So you got to keep that in mind. But no, there are definitely times when you're hitting those 50-pound fish where, let's call a spade a spade. It's going to be tough to fight. It's going to be fun to fight. And you're truly reeling up a trophy. And I think that's the biggest part of it too, is, you're really talking about a fish that is, I'm no scientist, but 20 something years old.
Right.
I think all of that gets involved in the fight too. It's much more than just, holy cow, this fish fights so well. They're not pit bulls like cobia. They don't run like drum, but it's just the allure of it, just knowing that this is a super old fish. It creates excitement, whether they're fighting or not. But they definitely can. You have your ones every now and then that have that extra energy for sure.
Yeah. And so I'm out there on a trip with you. We're striped bass fishing. That's going to be the thing that we're doing. Or is there some other bycatch that we might run into or other things that we can do on those trips? Or are these going to be, wholly focused on going after that trophy?
Yeah, we are wholly focused on going after that trophy. That's not to say, with the season last year being as good as it was, we started getting a little creative. We were catching fish. So we were like, well, let's see what else they'll eat. And we're throwing out mojos, umbrella rigs, and things of that nature. And, every now and then we are catching schoolie stripers and stuff like that, which is also super neat because then you get to eat a striper sandwich when you get home. But yeah, I would say, especially where we are in the bay and the method of fishing that you're doing, it's a lot involved. So that is solely your target when you're doing this type of thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can attest, man. I mean, you get one of those schoolie stripers that is in that harvest size range.
Yeah.
Some battered, fried rockfish, is probably one of my favorites. Yeah, it's so good. It's got that buttery, mild flavor. It's not very fishy, and it eats so good. It's got a unique flavor. Some fish are just kind of like fish, where you kind of have to season it and this, that, and the other. Other fish really carry a flavor, and rockfish does. So folks that are listening in, they've gotten to hear your voice for the first time, that want to book a trip on
Yep.
Naughty Dog and get out there with you. What's the best way for them to contact you and get booked for a trip?
Right. So obviously, I got the Facebook and the Instagram. I just want to double check because I probably made them two different names. The Facebook is Naughty Dog Charters. The Instagram is Naughty Dog Fishing.
Okay.
And then you can always reach me by phone. That's probably the easiest way at 757-641-9199.
Perfect.
And yeah, those are the three ways to reach me. I'm not fancy enough to have a website. Not electronically inclined. I'm trying, but here we
No,
are.
you're good. You're good. And for those listening, we'll drop those into the show notes. Obviously, Naughty Dog is spelled like nautical, Nauti. And I'm looking at your page now, and your picture there is obviously one of Jenny Olmsen Shutter
Yeah.
Speed's photos. Gosh,
She's the
she's so
best.
talented, man. It really captures the essence of a moment on the water.
Oh
Just
yeah.
those black and white photos are so cool. I've got some prints coming. I bought some
Yes,
prints.
you
I'm
have
super
to.
excited.
Yes.
Plugging Jenny big time here. Go check out Shutter Speed and find your picture. She took some incredible photos from the King of Ling tournament. I'm doing like a montage thing. It's going to be
There you
really cool.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's the best, man. She's, her and I, met through Instagram. She's the kindest person you'll ever meet. And she's offering herself up even to actually this striper season. Her and I got back and forth last season, didn't get a chance to get her on, but she's offering just to come take photos for me, just to experience it, because fingers are crossed. But after what we saw last season, like I said, I was a little boy the last time striper fishing was as good as it was last year. So,
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that it keeps itself up.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to see what happens. Thanks for being on the show, man.
Yeah, man.
Excited to hear some reports once we actually dig into it. So
Yeah.
those that are listening, it's about a month out. Jump on, get booked on Naughty Dog, make it happen.
Let's do
Y'all hang around for a word from our sponsors that make these great reports free for you each week, and we'll be right back with you soon. It's time we talked about catching some serious savings. Imagine harnessing the power of the sun to cut your energy bills and having a roof that's built to last. Convert Solar and Roofing specializes in top-notch solar installations and durable roofing solutions that stand up to the toughest elements. Their solar panels are designed to maximize efficiency, and their roofs are built with premium materials to ensure long-lasting protection. Whether you're out on the water or at home, their expert team ensures you're covered. As fellow anglers in the Lower Chesapeake Bay, the team at Convert Solar and Roofing cares about both sustainable living and sustainable fishing. So reel in those savings today and visit www.convert-solar.com or call 757-44-SOLAR. Make your energy and roof as reliable as your favorite fishing lure. Call Convert Solar and Roofing today. All right, y'all. Well, welcome to this final segment of this week. We're going to be talking a little inshore fishing. Excited to have a friend of the show back on, Captain Kenny Mills with Sea Shift Sport Fishing. What's going on, Captain Kenny? How you been, man?
Hey, man, I've been pretty good, kicking things in gear with the fall, doing a lot of speckled trout and puppy drum style fishing. Haven't really been out of the inlet much. It's been really fun staying inside. So
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I'm looking at a bunch of pictures. It's cool to see, that you get so many kids involved and, see a bunch of big smiles on faces. I saw you took my buddy George out recently with his son and put them on some monster puppy drum there on some light tackle. With your boat, you can still get around the inlet just fine. So, talk me through some of those different trips that you guys have been doing and how you're targeting those inshore species.
yeah, so I have the Spotlight trolling motor, which we all know is the game changer, and I'm able to move around the inlet, and I'm inside Rudy Inlet, and we have a handful of hot spots, so I just kind of go from spot to spot and lock the motor in. We hang out for about 15 minutes. If nothing happens, and we move on to the next spot, and we just keep bouncing around till we find them. And lately, some of the same spots have been producing over and over, so it's actually, we've got it dialed in right now.
That's a That's a big advantage, that spot lock for sure. Especially in the inlet, you got these kind of quieter waterways. How impactful or I guess how important is it that you're able to move around on spot lock as opposed to having to, crank the motor up?
The as far as the sound goes, I don't think in Rudy it's a big deal, but I do think stuck in that anchor would mess it up more than the sound of the motor. But that's what's nice. You fish a spot and you want to move. You're not pulling an anchor out of the mud and
Yeah.
with all that in your boat and then trying to rinse it off. Like you just hit a button, point it where you want to go, and off you go. So that's kind of the advantage of you don't sit there debating on whether to move spots because it's so easy to do it. You just do it. So,
Yeah, that's definitely a big game changer. And then, when it comes to boat maintenance and cleaning, I spent a day out in the river in the kind of western branch of the Lynnhaven recently and, pulling anchor and this, that, and the other. And next thing you know, I had an hour long, scrubbing marathon just trying to get dirt out of my boat. So that's definitely a plus that you got that spot lock going.
yeah, man, that anchor will pull up clay and stuff. Yeah,
That's
bad.
it's a headache. So what kind of you mentioned a couple species. So, folks are tuning in that are wanting to get out there. One of the cool things about Rudy is that you've got this nice mixed bag of species, right there, and that flux of water coming in and out from the ocean, brings in, kind of new stuff almost daily, it seems. So what are you guys seeing as most prevalent right now in your trips?
So the puppy drum and red drum, say both names because we're catching drum from anywhere from 15 inches up to 35 inches. So most of them are sitting in that 25-inch range, like a perfect size fish to really give you some pull on a 2,500 or 3,000, and we're catching over 30 inches, often. So that's what has been pretty good. The speckled trout have been almost every cast you can catch one, but it's been a lot of, I call them dinks.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put in the time, you get some bigger ones in the mix.
Yeah.
But I feel like the big ones are a little behind schedule this year because the water temps are still pretty warm. And judging on what some buddies are doing eastern shore wise and stuff like that, and it seems like they're on the way. So I have noticed the night bite for speckled trout. The bigger fish are starting to bite pretty good too at night. So that's a plus. That just shows you're being a little more active in the cooler weather.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, as the weather changes and you've got, times where maybe during the day the water temperature might be cooler than the air temperature, and then in the evening, I guess the inverse becomes true. Do you feel like that has something to do with it, or is it light related? What do you think is kind of that difference maker for those bigger speckled trouts wanting to kind of be a little more active later in the day and into the evening versus, morning, midday?
Man, I do think they get fired up the cooler it gets. I think when that sun goes down, then they come closer to closer to the surface. I do think it's just the cooler temperatures with nightfall versus the sun beaming on them. Once the water gets under 60 degrees, it doesn't. It seems like you can get them in the day pretty good. 55 seems to be that magic trout number for daytime.
Mm-hmm.
And Rudy, it really gets good at night. Between now and Christmas, we go in there at night, and you gotta switch your tactic up the colder it gets. We use a lot of switch baits, the ones that are suspended, not necessarily the sinking ones, and it's just really slow action. Like you could make a cast and it's 5 minutes before you've completed reeling it back in.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's a nighttime cold water thing, but in the daytime, man, right now, they seem to be hitting everything from jig heads with gulps to mirror lures to artificial shrimp on a popper. And if you got live minnows, you can do that. There's so many little ones, it's kind of hard to mess with live bait right now. You'll catch them, but they're just you're gonna constantly be dealing with it. But it almost seems like once you find them, it doesn't matter what you're throwing at them right now. They're just gonna eat it.
Yeah. Well, especially if somebody's, wanting to get out there and maybe take their kids or just have some fun. I mean, it is definitely worth doing just to get out there and just get tight. Obviously dinks are smaller fish, but it's still just that fun of casting and then feeling that thump, each and every time is definitely worth it. And then, knowing that there's a chance for you to get into some bigger, red drum, you're going to definitely get that good fight on that red drum. And then the other thing, folks that are listening that maybe aren't super familiar with Rudy Inlet, it's not like this big, like long ride to get anywhere. You're basically fishing as soon as you step foot onto the boat, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. Look, as soon as you leave the ramp, or for me, leave the dock, you're automatically somewhere you can give it a shot. So like, there's plenty of room to fish around, but it can cover the whole area in half a day, and or you can spend the whole day as well dialing it in. But that's what's nice about Rudy. And some guys that might not get into the boat world and might have some kayaks and stuff. The kayaks are super accessible in there. A lot of guys fish off paddle boards and stuff like that. And if you want, you can go down to like First Street and fish from land. You got to cast over some rocks, but you're allowed to fish from land at the end of the boardwalk there. And those guys are catching spot if you're into that, which I actually love spot. But you can catch a lot of spot right now, and they're also catching speckled trout from that same wall. And the other cool thing with the action of the small fish, we busted out the fly rods quite a bit because it's such a good bite that you can get some time in on the fly rod. And even if it's a small fish, if you're using a really small fly rod like a 3-weight or something like that, it's a blast. So that's one thing we've been doing.
That would definitely be fun on a fly rod. So that those guys that are listening in that like to pick up the fly, I hope you heard that correctly, because you can really get tactical, chasing after some trout on a fly rod. And do you find that that's more successful, fly versus conventional? Time of day, same thing, no difference, or is there a time where the fly seems to be more successful than the conventional rods and reels?
So I've had way more success in the day. Not necessarily a certain time of day, but with the sun up and, that fly up. The ones I use, they're kind of just like small, we call them clousers, but they just, once you get them moving, they look like a minnow. And I've been doing well with those in a day. Honestly, haven't given it a good enough shot at night lately to really say one's better than the other. But in my past experience, I feel like the night doesn't really produce unless you can get on a good dock light, like a green light or something like that. Then the fly rod will, you throw that fly in a green dock light. It's, who knows what you're going to catch. We've caught some decent stripers lately too at night. So, you got that option as well.
That does sound like fun. And, when it comes to the action that you're providing, and it sounds like you've got this, pretty dialed in terms of like the water temperature, maybe the speed at which you're going to work your retrieve. Obviously, there's going to be differences between like the mirror lure, maybe a slick lure, a suspending twitch bait, and then like your traditional, jig and a grub. Kind of talk me through, like, mentally, when you're picking up those different lures, are you putting them on different types of rods, or are you kind of fishing the same type of rod for all three?
For the most part, I'm using, a real light rod, because with speckled trout, and you get that long cast, which you get from like a 15-pound braid. I like to use like a 15-pound braid. You can even go to like 12-pound. You just have that, using a mirror lure and a 7-foot rod. I've actually started using a couple of the toadfish combos, and those things are just smooth. But anytime you go to like 20-pound braid or higher, you notice your distance for casting starts getting a lot shorter.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like getting that smooth cast, little effort for these trout, and that 15-pound braid. I like the Power Pro. Green moss is actually what I like to use. I feel like it has a wax on there that helps it slide off itself. So when you cast, it just slicks right off itself. Versus, I mean, it could just be me, but I think it's even better than the yellow, even though it's the same exact line.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to that green moss, the way it's coated. So,
Oh yeah.
that's what I like to use for the speckled trout. If I'm doing some puppy drum where I'm fishing on the bottom, which we have been doing with some of these shrimp, which I'll get into that in a second, but I've been using shrimp, and I like to use a 4,000 because we're fishing around a lot of pilings. And once those, you get a 30-inch drum on, you got to take a minute to manhandle them. Either manhandle them, or you got to, once he gets around a piling, then you got to switch to finesse and hope he turns in your favor. So I do use a little more backbone if I'm bottom fishing for a drum.
Okay. You mentioned the toadfish combo and how it's pretty slick. What in particular about that combo, which by the way, folks that are listening, kind of like me, I knew toadfish is like the koozie can holder with the suction, and then boom, all of a sudden they've got these, laundry list of really cool fishing products. So you've actually used one. What is it that you like about it?
And it's really smooth when you're reeling it, and the rod, I have the 7-foot rod, and it feels just crazy light. But then when you get a fish on that's with some size to it, it's got so much backbone that you don't feel when you're casting. But when you really get bent over, you're like, man, this thing, I can actually turn this fish, and that's kind of what I like about them. Because some of the other stuff I use, I use some cheaper, or I call it middle of the road, like the Penn Fierce, stuff like that, because charters, when you get to that type of fishing, they can beat your stuff up. So when you're using that rod, it doesn't have the same, it feels the same, but when you get a big fish on, it has nowhere near the backbone of these toadfish. And then they're just smooth, man. They're really smooth. And the ones that I do have actually have the toadfish braid, 15-pound braid, which is, really smooth as well. And it matches the rod, which is kind of cool, even that doesn't matter. But
Well, I mean, I think that there's the joke about like, fishing lures don't catch fish, they catch fishermen. But I mean, there is something to be said about like, even like in golf, like putters, for example, you can sit there and nerd out on all these different this, that, and the other. But if you like what you're looking down at, it does tend to translate to you're more effective in what you're doing. And so, liking the rod and reel that you're holding, adds to your level of confidence and just, the way that you're working the lure and all that jazz, hopefully coming together to, getting more hookups. So you were going to talk briefly about shrimp. So pop and cork shrimp. Well,
yeah, so the one thing to throw out there, man, the shrimp boats are starting to really do well right now. There's 3 to 5 different shrimp boats in Rudy Inlet, and it's some of the best local shrimp. Best shrimp I've ever had, and it's really sweet. They're green tails, they're great size, and the plus to it is, if you go down and support these local shrimp guys, but take the heads off the shrimp after you eat the shrimp. Go back and fish with the shrimp heads, and man, it is one of the best baits for striper and drum. They love these shrimp heads, and if they're anywhere around, they're coming. So it's kind of a win-win. You buy some shrimp, and you're getting some really good bait at the same time.
I can definitely attest to that. And the other cool thing about buying fresh shrimp too is like when you're taking the heads off the shrimp, a lot of times that vein will come right out with the head when you pop it off, which just makes it that much easier. And if not, then you can always use Toadfish has that really cool shrimp cleaner that is the deveiner and butterfly tool in one. And I can personally attest those greentail shrimp are some of the tastiest shrimp that I have had in a long time. And growing up in a, family that does seafood, Sam Russ Seafood, I've eaten a lot of shrimp. These things are phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree, man. They're one of the best. I have that tool from Toadfish as well. Not to make it a Toadfish commercial, but that thing makes quick work of it. So it's pretty cool. And
Well, it's fun.
we actually.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So yeah, we took a bunch of shrimp to the firehouse, yesterday, and we chowed down on some shrimp, at work. So that was cool.
That is definitely cool. Well, you made the comment not to make it a Toadfish commercial, but it's worth saying Toadfish is actually going to be one of our newest sponsors of the show, and get to talk to Casey Davidson and learn a little bit about what they do in terms of like their "Put 'em back" slogan and what that is, based on. That 10% of their I think it's 10%. I could be wrong. Of their proceeds, go to replanting oyster habitat and helping to keep the waterways clean, which then ultimately helps support an ecosystem where speckled trout and puppy drum can thrive. So it's really neat to see that coming together. Man, if folks have tuned in and are like, man, I got to get in on this, let me get a Toadfish rod in my hand and go hop on with Captain Kenny and catch some fish in Rudy. What's going to be the best way they can contact you and book a trip on Sea Shift?
You can contact me through Sea Shift Sport Fishing Virginia Beach on Facebook and Fishing Captain Kenny on Instagram, or my phone number is 757-681-1099. You can just give me a call or a text, and we'll take a look at the calendar and try and get you out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Captain Kenny. I appreciate the report very much, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Y'all stick around for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back with you here shortly. Tired of battling salt corrosion on your boat, trailer, and reels? Meet Salt's Gone, your ultimate solution. This powerful, instantly acting chelating agent tackles salt and brine with ease, featuring corrosion inhibitors to protect against future damage and surfactants for a thorough clean. Salt's Gone is pH neutral, making it safe for all boat materials: metal, glass, paint, vinyl wraps, and more. Highly concentrated, just 1 gallon creates 100 gallons of ready-to-use solution. Apply it with or without running water. It's perfect for any situation. Use code GREATDAYS10 to save 10% at saltsgone.com. Or if you need faster delivery, use Amazon or your favorite retailer. All right, guys. Well, welcome to the What Did You Learn segment. I really enjoyed getting to talk to Bobby with Top Notch. Of course, his dad is Captain Russ. And just getting to dive into the mind of the mate, it's such a critical job to the overall success of any, charter operation, in terms of like, the hierarchy perception of a mate versus a captain. It's very clear that these guys, work in a very synergistic way. They've got to be able to communicate. There's no job that's more important than the other. One can't exist without the other. So just, to all the mates out there, my hat's off to you. You guys work so hard to make the show happen. I was also really impressed by the number of lists that he has. Clearly organization is key. And that's something that I learned and took away from, talking to Bobby, is that I need to go revisit, spend this winter time, for what I like to fish for, and go through and really start to create some inventory and make sure that there's nothing that I'm missing that I would need in order to be successful on any given fishing trip. So definitely a good takeaway there is to be prepared, think of it almost like your business or your personal finances, to actually like spend time, create a list, create a plan, and be ready for action. Talking to Caleb, with Naughty Dog, I got to learn a lot about striper fishing, and it was very interesting to learn about the difference between the eastern shore and the western shore, and it does really make me want to dig in a little bit deeper and understand why are these larger trophy fish on the eastern shore versus these more schooly size harvest size fish on the western shore. surely there's got to be a difference. So, look forward to digging into that in a future episode, kind of learning the why or the science behind that. But definitely excited to start talking to Caleb a little bit more as they get into the striper fishing here in the next month, and hopefully pull a couple of trophies over the side of the boat. And then finally, Captain Kenny, who's been on the show for several times, I really enjoyed hearing him talk about just the level of detail he gets into for, speckled trout and red drum fishing, thinking about like how smooth is the line that's going through the guides, all of that ultimately breaking down to, how good can you feel that bite? Hearing him talk about how some of his retrieves on a cast could take as much as 5 minutes, like that hit me after the conversation to really sit there and picture myself. I can't think of a time I've ever taken 5 minutes to retrieve. I think I'm naturally just too impatient. And so I think a really great learning lesson there is that we've got to pay attention to the water temperatures as we're fishing. When they drop and those fish become more lethargic, we really have to slow it down and kind of trust and wait for that bite, because it might take 3-4 minutes into a retrieve. A fish could be very lazily, following that bait, that twitch bait, suspending bait. And definitely a great option there is going to be, your slick lure, those toadfish, combos like he was talking about. Those two things in conjunction can be a really, really great way to get after some speckled trout and actually have the sensitivity and then also the backbone to reel that fish in and keep it on the hook. Then finally, just talking about what's to come. Here we are, almost November. Christmas is right around the corner. So, for those of you that are thinking about, gift giving, there's two great options that we have right now in terms of some savings. So salt's gone. We heard from Zach McAllister and learned a whole lot about the chemistry and the benefits. I personally use it religiously, flushing my motors, cleaning the boat, rinsing it off with it, and making sure that it keeps all of my metal shiny, clean, corrosion free. So if you've got a fisherman in your life, or you just want to save some money yourself, you can use that code GreatDays10 to save 10% at saltsgone.com. And then Toadfish, obviously, as a new sponsor, they've been fantastic to us, and they have a huge Rolodex of great products. Everything from the folding fillet knife to the shrimp cleaner to rods and reels, and even braid, as we learned from Captain Kenny. So if you want to save with Toadfish, you're going to use you're going to go to gdo.deals/toadfish, and 15% off is going to be applied to your cart. So amazing opportunity to save there. We're extremely grateful to our partner sponsors, both with Salt's Gone and Toadfish, as they're making these things available to you, our audience that tunes in each week. So guys, weather's changing. It's getting a little cooler out there. We're going to start having some changes in the bite and how things work. So excited to keep talking to our captains and learn as we go. Wish you guys a great weekend ahead, and hopefully tight lines to everybody. Sam Rust Seafood, your locally trusted source for premium wholesale seafood. Servicing customers from Hampton Roads down through the Outer Banks, Richmond, and surrounding areas, including Fredericksburg, Charlottesville, and Lynchburg, for over 80 years. Committed to the highest standards in the industry, Sam Rust distributes the best of the ocean directly to your restaurant, hotel, or grocery store on time and at a great price. Visit samrust.com to discover how quality, tradition, and sustainability come together. So don't cuss, call Sam Rust.
Would your insurance cover an air ambulance in a medical emergency? Fact is, insurance often doesn't cover the full cost of medical flights, leaving you and your loved ones at financial risk. But with an AirMed Care Network membership, you can focus on recovery, not on finances, should the unexpected happen. AirMed Care takes care of everything, with no costs for flights when flown by one of their providers. Membership covers your full household and starts at $99 a year. Visit gdo.com/airmedcare to enroll.
So that's going to wrap it up this week. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, to get your free Aftco Camo Sunglasses Cleaning Cloth, just text the acronym LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get your promo code and be added to our email list so we can send you the new show each week. You guys keep whacking them and be safe out there.